Welcome, everyone. We're having a great presentation today. And let me start off by talking about the person. There's a power in speaking truth without flinching, and Mark Attwood brings that power wherever he goes. He's known for his unapologetic voice, spiritual grit, and the raw intensity of his poetry. He doesn't just explore awakening, he embodies it. His topic today is navigating God's plan with visible action. This opens a door to a deeper conversation, one that lives in the space between surrender and movement. It invites the question, when you sense something higher at work in your life, what do you do with it? How do you move in alignment and not just in thought? Mark doesn't deliver messages from a safe distance. He speaks as someone who has stood in the unknown, challenging narratives, and followed truth at great personal cost. His presence on stage has a way of cutting through noise because he speaks to what most of us are only beginning to name. And so I want to turn it over to Becky, who has her own personal thoughts on this.
Thank you very much, Angela. And yes, it's wonderful to have you here, Mark, joining us today in Connecting Consciousness, because I met you about 3 years ago in Birmingham at a Charlie Ward event. And it was a really wonderful day because it was just after the COVID lockdowns were stopped and everyone coming together, and the audience were just so excited to be there, and it really, the energy in the room was really fantastic. It was a great day, and I know that you made a big impression, and your career it didn't take off from there because you already had a good career, but your career seemed to go more worldwide, and you've become well known worldwide for the work that you do and for addressing issues and sometimes creating a stir with it. So thank you very much, Mark, for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing what you say. Mark, you're on mute. You're on mute. We had this at the start as well.
That's good because I was swearing then, so that's good. That was muted. That's a good bit. Okay, that's sound. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I loved meeting you 3 years ago. It was an amazing day. It really was an amazing day, wasn't it? Yeah, I'll never forget that day. And thank you, Angela. That was an incredible introduction. If you want a job, I'll send you my number afterwards. That was really well done. Very nice. And a bit bizarre. It's a bit like doing things like this is a bit like doing a job interview. It's like hundreds of people looking at it and you're like, yeah, I'm a bit spiritual and I think I'm qualified for this position because I'm an idiot. But you'll be glad to know I'm not going to do a presentation because I hate those. I hate PowerPoint, but no offense to anybody that likes PowerPoint presentations. It's just not me. So if you're expecting a PowerPoint, maybe go make a cup of tea and then come back in half an hour when it gets interesting. I thought, if it's all right with you guys, could I start this with a poem? And I want to tell you the story about this poem, if I can. Now, who's this guy writing poems in the middle of the Great Awakening? I kept, you've got all that self-doubt, and during COVID especially, they were coming in like I couldn't. They were churning them out, right? And I did have a background as a poet because I was first published in 1990. I set a thing up called the Live Poets Society. Because I watched the Dead Poets Society and I was like, well, they're all dead. What's going on? Let's set up a live one. And we had a big group of people in Manchester, one of which was Henry Normal, who became one of the biggest comedy producers in Britain. And another one was Dave Gorman, who was a 19-year-old maths student at the time. He's on the back of there, actually, if anybody knows Dave Gorman. That's me with the scarf. And I'm very good at writing poetry when I'm under pressure and when there's bad things going on. I mean, at my auntie's funeral 20 years ago, I had a church of 600 people in stitches with a poem that she asked me to write before she died. I'm very good around death, actually. When I wrote these poems, I just left the RAF and realised that the royal family weren't all they were made out to be. And I just turned my dad's life support machine off because he had a brain hemorrhage when I was 17 and I had to turn his life support. So I wrote poems. So when COVID came, all these poems started coming out, and I'd have to pull over They were all coming in, pull over, and right, get these put out. And this particular poem, what was really interesting about this one, is people watching this going, poetry? I didn't think this was a poetry chat. What's he talking about? I'm going to get to the spiritual journey and all that stuff in a minute. But this poem was literally given to me. And what was beautiful about it was that I kept getting these messages from this guy who was like a world-class cinematographer, and he said, I need to work with you. I don't know what on. I need to work with you. And then I kind of missed him for a year or so. And then suddenly I was like, oh, we'll do this poem. Told him about this. And then suddenly he got a proper, top grade film editor to come in and edit. And then this woman who scores movies in Hollywood, who lives in East Europe somewhere, she said she wanted, and they all wanted to work on it for free. And I was like, how's this happening? And we went out and filmed this video. And it was just amazing. And then when the point of the story is that when this poem is really for you guys, right? It's for everybody that has felt like a black sheep in the family, who's felt a bit ostracized, a bit weird, who sees ghosts, UFOs, fairies, all the stuff, me basically. And when I produced it, I got the cut. And I stood in this room and I put it on, and I stood at the back door listening to it. And then I got this message halfway through it saying this was for you too, Mark. And I just burst into tears. And so if I can, I'd like to play this because it's dedicated to all of us that are standing up in the fight against evil. Is that okay? Right, I'll see if I can find it. Here we go.
You want to screen share? Oh, there we go.
There you go. Here we go. Then I'll disappear for a minute.
I see you twinkling in the sky, shimmering in Van Gogh's eye, sparkling as the starseed you really are. You've come so far, born onto the facsimile earth, all memories erased. Not one iota of your talents, of the children you once raised. I see. You never felt accepted. You never felt the same. Your friends and family alien, often seemed insane. They pointed fingers at you. They laughed behind your back. Whilst you were dancing with fairies and angels, you were on a different track. I see you. You felt alone, did your best. You smiled through all the pain. They beat you and abused you. They knew you'd come to end their reign. As winters came and summers left, the leaves fell over years. The spirit voice inside your soul grew louder through your tears. I see you. They broke you down, they tricked you, they stabbed you through the heart. They feasted on your effervescence, they relished you apart. They stole your youth, they stole your money, convinced you they were right. But every time they ripped you open, closer came their light. I see you. Like the caterpillar at the end of life, entombed inside the cocoon. The hero's journey final act, when all seems certain doom. Those belittle words of faith and belief diminish amidst the noise, yet you hold on, you won't let go. For the battle, you are poised. I see. Deep, deep down, you hear the cry. In remembrance, you answer, yes. The fight was laid before you. To come was yet the best. Besmirched, belittled, tossed aside, you nearly lost your way. Letting go of all beloveds, and tried your truth to say, I see. As the veil dissipated, as all the solids melted, the remnants left fought their way to sovereignty, once doubted. You stood your ground, you found your power, your strength became unbounded. For you are the warrior child of this world, in your brilliance, our future founded. I see you.
Don't ever make me run a fucking sand dune for a fucking poem again. You
I can't resist the joke. And it's very important to not resist the joke, because if we take all this too seriously, we're in big trouble, right? So humor is the key to that. I hope you enjoyed that. Anyway, but it's an amazing. Becky said that my career it's quite funny using the word career when it comes to this, because I don't see this as a career at all. It's like I had my career, but all the way through my life, I knew that there was something else coming. I just knew. People would say, "Oh, you've made it now," because I was successful in business and I did loads of different things. I'll talk to you about my story in a second, but when all of this came to a head, I had no choice. I literally had no. I got nagged by God to start a podcast. It sounds crazy, and I didn't say that for ages because I was embarrassed about saying it. I thought it sounds stupid, But I was driving on a road trip with my son, my eldest son, to Limerick, which is ironic actually, because Limerick is a town in Ireland, and my grandmother was born there and taken out of there in 1916 and dumped in Luton, and nobody in my family would ever talk about that. And I didn't even find out she was Irish until I was about 20. And, she had 11 children, including my mum, who was one of them. And none of them would talk about it. And ironically, my first episode of my podcast was my son pointing a camera at me on the bridge in Limerick, by the river, by the castle, looking at the Masonic Centre across the road. It was really bizarre. My voice was really high, and I was talking like this because I was a bit nervous. and I was like, why do you want me to start a podcast? Because I'd been talking about everything that's been going on in the world to anybody that would listen. I'd done it on Facebook, I'd done it on social media a bit, but I'd never done it on video, and I'd never done it online, because my waking up, and I'll tell you that in a sec, has been going on since I was born. But and I literally said, what am I going to talk about? But as it turns out, I've done about 100,000 hours of research over 50 years. So I didn't. My job was not to wake anybody up. It was really to hold people's hand and say, it's okay, we're going to be okay. Because it was such an isolating time, wasn't it? 2020, 21 we were isolated, and we were all in strange. I don't know about all of you guys, but I found myself in Ireland, and I was like, what am I doing here? Because I used to live in Marrakesh, and I moved from 40, 50 degrees Celsius. That's hot if you're in America. It's very hot. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's hot. And then I moved here, and it was cold and wet and windy and rainy, and I was like, why am I here? And there is an interesting story to that. The conclusion I came to is that a lot of us were placed in positions because we were holding the light. We were holding the consciousness in a kind of lattice that had to be held together. And as it rose, we were the ones just holding on to it. And this town in particular, I've got a lot to tell you about this, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back because ultimately, I'm not here to teach you anything because you're all teachers already. Now, with connecting consciousness, I have a lot of gratitude to give, especially to Michael and Julie in Ireland, because Michael, I don't know if you guys know Michael in Ireland, but he has a connection with this town because he was here years ago with hanging out with the woman that set up the UFO Society of Ireland, which was based here after there was a UFO crash here in '97. And she was an amazing woman called Betty Mailer. I never met her, but I was very close to meeting her because I've been coming to this town for 25 years. That's another story. And I met Michael and Julie. They came over to Boyle and we got on like a house on fire. And it was around the time, I think the first time I was out and gave a public talk was actually with Connecting Consciousness in a castle down in Cork. I can't remember the name of the castle, but it was such a relief. And I was so relieved to meet all these conscious people, because when I first sat in front of this computer in 2020 to start the podcast, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one in Ireland, at least, and I was like, where are all the fighting Irish? So it was amazing, and I've got a lot of gratitude to Michael and Julie and all the people that I met because I went to a few parties with them, and they it was really good for my sanity at the time. So I personally got a gratitude of debt there. And also, I want to say thank you to whoever runs the CC in Nashville, because I did go there for a day when there was an event on there, and I said hello to a lot of people. And then I literally flew. It was a funny story, actually. I was in Anaheim in Los Angeles on this. I think it was we'd done 17 cities in 30 days around the whole of America. And the funny thing was about that tour is that the tour was being organized by a guy called Lewis Herms, who set up Screw Big Gov in California. And he invited me to do this tour. There's a few funny things about it. Firstly, I had a load of fake papers to get into America. Right, this is 2022. So I went and I didn't do anything online. I did it all printed out. I thought they're not going to get me that way. So I got fake this, fake that, big pile of papers. And I was stood in the queue in Dublin because you have to go through American whatever to get into America before you get on the plane. And everybody in front of me was being pulled off and interviewed and interrogated into rooms. And I was like, oh my God, what if I get caught with these? What's going to happen? And then I just had this moment when I got told, you're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. And this is all part of my journey to trusting that voice and trusting God, for want of a better term. And I got to the desk and I slammed my papers on the desk, and the guy looked at me and I was like, what's he going to say? And he went, have you got any tobacco on you? And I thought, that's a weird question to ask to get into America. And I went, yeah, actually, I've got some fags in my bag. And he said, we don't use that word in this country. Welcome to America. And I walked in, looking over my shoulder, thinking I was going to get... And I just breezed around. And when we got around America, there's a lot of good stories I could tell you, but I've only got an hour. But the Nashville thing happened because it was after 17 days. And yeah, that's what I was going to tell you. So the tour dates were organized to be in the Democratic strongholds in America. And there was this morning when I was on an Indian reservation, and I'd taken my boots off to ground on the grass, and I was really looking after myself on this tour. I didn't eat in any of the service gas stations. The food was totally terrible. I can't believe any Americans are still alive with the food that is over there. And I stood there with my feet on the grass, and this beautiful Native American girl came up to me, and she just looked at me and said, my people say we are walking through a dream that we've already had. And then she walked off. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And then I got a text message from somebody who I'd only met on that tour, but she'd done a healing on me, a remote healing, about 7 or 8 years ago when I was, suicidal, which I'll get to. And she she'd sent me a map of the portals in America that exactly matched all these democratic strongholds. And it was, and it was in America. And I was saying things there that I thought I'd get rotten tomatoes thrown at me, like, COVID was the best thing that ever happened to humanity. Duck. Oh, they all agreed with me. And I was like, this is a good crowd. And we were followed by UFOs the whole way around. We had a private air show from the USAF, which was unbelievable. This is all on I did record it all. I actually took a cameraman and made a film out of it all, which I think I'm going to put on YouTube in a week if I think I can get away with the censorship, because they're always banning. I've been banned everywhere, but you just keep getting back up, don't we? Like cockroaches or Rocky Balboa. And then how many times you get hit, it's how many times you get off the floor. And that's the key, to this whole journey. It's like, who are we? Do you remember who you are? Are you sovereign? Are you taking care of yourself? And are you taking care of other people? And if you are, you're in a good place. But I'm going to go back. I've waffled a bit about America just because it came up, because there's so many beautiful experiences throughout this whole thing when you think the walls are closing in, I had to have a chat to myself when the podcast idea came into me. I knew it was coming. I knew all about the New World Order. I knew all about the royal family. I knew all of it. I was a classic conspiracy theorist. I'd been thrown out of parties. Even my own brother, who lives in Birmingham in England, defriended me in 2016 on Facebook. And I said, what? I said, why have you defriended me? I'm your brother. And he said it in a deep Birmingham accent, because I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, and he's had 6 vaxes, and so have his kids, and so has his wife, and that's a big part of this whole thing is learning how to, live with the fact that family and friends, and we've had to change everything. And that's the beautiful thing about COVID. We've had to let go of everything. But I'm going to go back, because ultimately, it's not about teaching you anything. It's about sharing a story. And you see, my story started in England in 1969. And I was born on the 13th of April, 69, which in numerology or numerical birthdays, I can't remember what it's called, but that turns out to be a 33-6, which I didn't know until I met somebody who told me. Which I thought was interesting, because all these little clues get given to you as you go along. And it's kind of like graduating in a computer game sometimes. But my life started in the womb of my mother's womb. And there was an abortion attempt on me when I was in the womb, which is something I didn't know until years later. And I now understand that was them trying to get rid of me. And some of you might understand what I'm talking about there, because they know who you are before you get here. There's a few people nodding. I can see a few nods going on. So they tried to stop me coming in before I even before I even came out the door. And then all sorts of things happened in my childhood, like I got meningitis, and my parents were told that I wasn't going to live, but I did. And then I got cut open, and there's quite a lot to the being cut open stuff. And the same with the mercury in the teeth. This is all part of a strategy to weaken us, and but do it under the cover of a health service. And this was back in the 70s, right? So I didn't understand any of this at the time. But in my village was, and I grew up in a village, I don't know if anybody here knows England very well, but there's a village called Bugbrook, which is in the Doomsday Book as Butcher Brock, which means badger by the brook. And it's a beautiful village. It's all Northamptonshire sandstone, and it's gorgeous. And my family on my dad's side goes back there centuries, right? So I'm very much a village boy. And there's a church in the village called the Bugbrook Church of England Church. And it was a place where my great-grandfather, Joe, was, he was famous there for climbing the steeple to fix the weathercock without a rope. He was a real athlete, and an amazing, lovely man that I was lucky enough to know until he passed when I was 11. But in that church in the 1950s, there was a lay preacher that came to that church. And a lay preacher is like somebody who's like an apprentice, vicar, right? And he was there, and his name was Noel Stanton. Now, as I was growing up, Noel Stanton had already established a church called the Jesus Fellowship in that village, which became the Jesus Army and became very famous in the UK because they would recruit people down in London who were, heroin addicts and stuff, bring them back to my village, rehabilitate them, and then get them working for free on their farms. And they became a multi-million. I know in America this is a normal story, but in England it's not that common. And it became a multi-million pound business. And Noel Stanton, as it turned out, had abused my dad when he was a choir boy at the age of 10. And that church itself got closed down, I think it was in 2018, 2019, due to the vast amount of paedophilia things against them, because all those kids had grown up and it was hundreds and hundreds of millions against this church, and it finally got closed down. And I did get abused by a doctor who was a member of that, a member of the Jesus Army as well, myself. And it was only 40 years later when I realized everybody in my family had been abused one way or another. Everybody. And I was like, oh, wow. And that's why I'm going to play you another poem now, because this poem I'm going to play now is actually the reason why I still get up in the morning, because when I was being asked to do the podcast, I had to sit here knowing that there was a plan to get rid of us, knowing that there was a 16-year plan in America that Clinton was supposed to continue with, knowing that there would be dots put on the front doors of people like me and we'd be carted off. This is why Obama bought 30,000 guillotines. This is why the FEMA camps were everywhere. I knew that was a risk, and I knew during COVID, because it was extremely stressful, that could happen. But I had to ask myself a question: am I willing to die so that my children don't live in the New World Order, don't live in Satan's world, basically? And the answer was, and always has been, every single day, 100% yes. And this poem, which I'm going to dig up now, is it's actually quite funny kind of funny that it has a similar title to the one that I just showed you, because I wrote this one first, and I actually wrote this one when there was a protest outside the BBC in 2021, and I was just amazed because I'd been, like a lot of people my age, I'd grown up with Jimmy Savile being on the TV in the 70s, and I would write letters to him every week, and he'd be like, now then, and I'd write him a letter: "Dear Jim, please fix it for me to be," and he was sat there with children on his lap, and the BBC were complicit in this, 100%. In fact, my last YouTube channel got taken down because I talked about Jimmy Savile was actually a wizard, okay, and he was part of a line that goes back to John Dee, who was Queen Elizabeth I's polyglot, who sunk the Spanish Armada 3 times off the coast near here in Sligo, 30 miles from here. He sunk the Spanish Armada 3 times using magic. And that line, I followed it through to Ian Fleming, Aleister Crowley, Jimmy Savile, and then Philip Schofield. And that's when my whole YouTube channel just got taken down instantly, no warnings, nothing. I wasn't doing medical misinformation. I was talking about something they really don't want you to talk about. And that's been my path all the way through this. So I think it's important that I share this poem with you, because it's really a statement to them from us about how we won't put up with what they're doing anymore.
From our eyes,
Here we go.
we see you. The scales have fallen from our eyes. The veil has drifted down from the sky, meandering firmly, finally revealing your depth of depravity. That's fear you're now feeling. We see you. Your demonic bloodlust laid bare to see, the statue of filth on the BBC, the prince and the madam, the crisper spy, the islands of horrors in the ocean lie. We see you. A billion souls stolen over the years. You hit them deep down to drown their tears. Perfect and innocent God's own creations, mutilated by your sick machinations. We see you. Vlad the Impaler and his vile descendants, fleeing the palace from the 5D ascendants. The virus distracted, but gave us the time to peel back the layers of your heinous crimes. We see you. Run, run as fast as you can, back for more orders from the Phoenician clan. Out of White Rabbit, the looking glass cracked. Tipping point reached, odds against you now stacked. We see you. Pizza and hot dogs, pasta and sauce. Your sickness decoded your lack of remorse. Our slumber is over, our eyes not wide shut. For the children of Haiti, a knife to your gut. We see you. Ascension is powered by the light of the flare. Scramble like rats to the ruins of your lairs. It's over, it's over. Save our children, we cry. Revealed, reviled. It's your soul's time to die. We see you.
Yeah, not actually watched that in ages. Don't go on a downer though, because we're going to win this war. We've won this war already, and what we're doing is sharing. These stories are so important to share. So I'm going to continue telling you how I got to this point, because I was. Oh, thank you. I can see all those things. That's really nice. I actually get very emotional when I play these, because I did actually put them all in a book. It's called God Wins, funnily enough. Sounds like a 70s furniture retailer, doesn't it? Welcome to God Wins. You get the sensational settee. But I wanted to capture all what's happened over the last 5 years in pictures, because a lot of these... Anyway, I'm not selling anything. You can't actually get this book anywhere, but I'm very proud of that. And it is a real privilege to be called to do this kind of thing. And I think the title of this talk was supposed to be like Navigating's God Plan with Visible Action, and I think that's really kind of my message overall. But my soul knew. I mean, I was a strange kid, because I had a really high IQ, which was not good when you're a council house kid, because all the other council house kids think you're a weirdo. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, I just knew I had to escape, and I was always dreaming of flying. From the moment I can remember, my first memory. Well, my first memory is actually in this book, which you can get, was called Weapons of Mass Protection, Practical Tools for Spiritual Warfare. And in this book, I talk about the fact that my first ever memory was demons trying to recruit me in my bedroom. And I remember when I first said that online, and I ended up talking about it on a podcast one day. And when the podcast finished, I got off slapping my head going, oh God, I'm ruined. I've just talked about demons on Tinternet. I'm ruined. But then I got hundreds of emails from people saying the same thing happened to me, but I've never told anybody. And I was amazed by this. And, and it was part of my journey to realize actually this stuff needs to be aired. And, that's what we're going through, is everything's going to be aired, and it's being aired. And it's difficult, it's painful, but it's beautiful at the same time, because the other side of it is where we know we're going to get to. But the demons would say things to me like, well, you're really powerful and we want to give you everything you want, and stuff like this. I mean, I'm 3 years old. And it was around the time of the miners' strike when Edward Heath, who was a well-known Satanist and pedivore, was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And he was doing terrible things with Jimmy Savile. I didn't know that, obviously, because I was a 3 or 4 year old. But he put the country into one of those fake bad situations where there was only electricity for 3 days a week. I think it was called the 3-day week or the 4-day week. I can't remember exactly. But my mum would bring in a little tea light, like a small tea light, because there were no lights and I was scared of the dark and I didn't want to go to sleep. And she put the tea light next to my bed. And I had a wall here and a tea light there next to the bed. And this night I remember sitting up and my shadow was there on the wall, normal kind of candle shadow. But on the other side of the room was something exactly the same, except it was sharply defined. There was no fuzzy edges to it. It was a black shadow, and it was me, but it had horns on. And I was doing this, sitting up and down for about an hour, trying to get rid of these horns, and I didn't know what was going on. And that was a memory that I'd kind of suppressed, because we do that. We have these strange experiences as children, and then they kind of either get knocked out of us, or we just move on with life, and then they pop back up later. And that's what's happened to me over the years, is that these things have popped back up as memories, and I think that's happening with a lot of us, which is a good thing, because these weird experiences aren't actually weird to a lot of us. In fact, I've got 5 of my own children are all psychic, and every time they had strange experiences, I was like, well, that's a gift. Don't fight it off, go with it, because you never know where it's going to take you. And I think that's something a lot of parents don't do with their children, is they just tell them to shut up and go to bed and be quiet, and worse, actually much worse. But I want to keep things chipper if I can. But so I had dreams of flying, and obviously as a council house kid, learning to fly an airplane in the 70s and 80s was not really on the agenda. I mean, my mum and dad worked their fingers to the bone and never had enough money. If there was a doorbell ring, I'd have to run upstairs and hide under the bed with my mum in case it was somebody collecting money. So it was an interesting time. It wasn't really on the agenda, but I discovered the Air Cadets. Cut a long story short, I became a pilot in the RAF, in the Royal Air Force. And I was completely and utterly Queen and country brainwashed, right? So bad that I would come home from parade on a Thursday night to watch Question Time, because I wanted to know what was going on with the politicians of the day. And at the end of Question Time, they would play God Save the Queen, and I would stand to attention, salute the TV when there was nobody else in the room. That's how bad it was, right? But then I got an award from the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, at St James's Palace. When I was 19, I turned up in my RAF uniform, proud as punch, in St James's Palace in London with my mum, fully dressed up. And Prince Philip came along, and he was shorter than me, and I'm only 5'8". Most people think he was really tall, but he wasn't. And he had skin like leather. And when I remember this is 1988, something like that. And his eyes were unbelievable, and I can still feel him now when I think about it. And I shook his hand, and I can still feel his bony hands. And he looked at me, and he looked me up and down, and he said, "I see you've joined the Royal Air Force." Somebody had to whisper in his ear, and I was, "What? You were the commandant of the RAF. You were made commandant in 1958." And I was saying this with my eyes to him, and he didn't like it. And he whipped his hand away, and he gave me the dirtiest look, and he moved on. And that day was really the beginning of my awakening, because I knew there was something wrong here. What I now know, and I don't want to go into the dark stuff too much, but there are dungeons underneath that place, and that guy was doing things that were not good, and he was probably high on something at the time, because you don't not recognize the uniform of the RAF. You just don't. It's just outrageous, really. But I knew something, so that was really the beginning of my sort of awakening. But, I was 19, I was full of energy, I had just discovered booze and girls and all of that, and I was traveling the world, and I was flying planes, and I was doing, I got the highest score in the Air Force that they'd given in 22 years. And when I got that score, I knew that I could leave, and I did. I resigned my commission, and they all thought I was insane. It took me a year to get out. They sent social workers to see me. They took me for interviews. They did so many things to stop me leaving. It was ridiculous, and it ended up costing a lot of money to get out. But I got out of the RAF, and then I became I went from being a pilot to poet, and then I did stand-up comedy, and then I was a journalist. And the funny thing about all these jobs that I ended up doing is that I was always very close to darkness. You know, when I was a journalist at the Daily Telegraph, I got headhunted, worked at the Daily Telegraph in London when I was like 20, 21. And that was, I can't remember the exact year, but the Lockerbie thing happened. And I was sat opposite the big reporter. And if you know anything about a guy called Max Hastings, he was the head of the Daily Telegraph at the time, and an extremely dark character, part of the cabal, 100%. And I was right next to it, and I saw all the drinking, and I saw the way, and I saw how fake news worked. This is the thing. I saw how fake news worked, to the point that I made a comedy show on Granada and Paramount TV in 1996 about a journalist who starts his, it's like a documentary on him, played by me, where he runs an old woman over and kills her, and then he blackmails a counsellor for going to Morocco with little boys, and it's all in this thing, and he's just creating fake news all the way in order to get higher ratings for his new investigative journalism show. I did that on TV in 1996. So it's been a crazy journey, but throughout all of that, while I was doing stand-up comedy, and I was in Manchester, and there was a Canadian comedian called Alan Park, who was doing really different comedy at the time, and I really got on with him. And we went for a curry on the Curry Mile in Manchester, and we ended up talking until about 6 o'clock in the morning. And during that chat, he gave me a copy of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I don't know if you guys have read that or not, but it's well worth looking up. In fact, the best place to find out about that, if you haven't seen Fall of the Cabal, Janet Osbard, on BitChute, and I think Cynthia has got her own Substack now, go and look up, not the first 10, I think it was episode 27 or something, and it's about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and it's a terrifying thing to read. And I read that, and it was just about the time of the Millennium Bug. Do you remember that? Everything was supposed to crash in 2000 because the computers were not supposed to work, and everybody was a bit nervous. And then what happened was 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, I was actually in intensive care in Stockport Hospital with a suspected heart attack, because I'd been swimming at my friend's wedding in Spain, and I'd gone against the tide, and I'd overexerted myself. My doctor friend said, "I think you've had a cardiac event, go to hospital." I said, "No, I'm going to go to my mate's wedding, and if I do die tonight, I'm going to have a cigar in one hand and a glass of brandy in the other." And I survived that night, but when I got back to Manchester, I wasn't well, so I went to the hospital, and they kept me in overnight. And my girlfriend at the time walked in the morning. I said, "What's been going on?" She said, "2 planes have just crashed into the World Trade Center." I went, "What?" And the funny thing is, I'd prophesized this about a year earlier in a business meeting I was at, like a cyber security business meeting, because I was working in this job. And I'd said, what happens if they just fly planes into, and there it was, it had just happened. I didn't know right there and then, but this is the beginning of my healing journey, really, because the nurse the night before had told me that I was probably going to die. I now understand what that's all about, because if you believe something, then it happens. When you get a terminal diagnosis, that's what happens. You die to the minute if they give you a terminal diagnosis. And it's the same with disease names. There's no such thing as disease. It's just overtoxification with symptoms that they've labeled with a name. If you believe you have something, you're gonna continue, because that's how powerful our minds were. But I didn't know this then. But it was the beginning of that journey as well, because I basically unplugged myself and walked out of the hospital and went straight to the local shop and bought a packet of cigarettes. And then the nurse rang me up and said, "If you die while you're out, it's your own fault." I said, "Yes, I know, bye." And, that was really, I've always been a bit of a rebel in that respect. And it's stood me in good stead, because here I am now doing what I'm doing now. But back then, I didn't realize when I saw the towers go down that I was actually watching one of my school friends die. So one of the people in the tower was a guy called Jeff Campbell, who was the year below me at school, and his brother and I were best friends. And I watched Matthew Campbell, and I think the Campbells are the only family that are still fighting for justice. If you look them up, they keep going back again and again and again to keep trying to get the truth out about 9/11. And I was over Matt's shoulder as a burgeoning conspiracy theorist. Matt wasn't at the time. He was just suffering from the shock of his brother dying. Now, Matt told me a few things then in 2001. He shook the hand of Clinton and George Bush, and Tony Blair in the church or the cathedral in New York. 2 weeks later, the family were given a document this thick to sign, which would have taken years for any lawyer to write, right? Sign this, and then they all got given $1 million, and all of those families got paid, but not all. As time went by, there was an amazing woman who was fighting for her, truth, and she was really outspoken right from the beginning. It took the Campbells a few years to really get into that, but I remember realizing on the day that I realized that they blew up a plane with 200 people on just to get rid of her in New York, and this is like, oh my God, I've read the protocols of the Elders of Zion. I know that this is not the story, the official story. Oh, and it just opened up, and I couldn't get enough of it, right? Because I wanted to understand what was going on. And that led to a number of other things like, and the reason I'm telling you this is because God puts you in incredible positions in order to prepare you for this battle. That's my belief. And that's my experience, right? And when COVID happened, I got a flashback to all these things that had happened in my life, and I was like, oh, that's why I was there. That's why it all makes sense, because I can talk with authority about a lot of these things. When I started my podcast, my job was not to wake people up and say, oh my God, the government's going to try to kill you. It was like, that was obvious. It wasn't that. That wasn't my job. My job was to say to everybody that was already awake or half awake, to say, it's going to be okay. Just look after yourselves. Let's get through this. And I was over Matt's shoulder while he was having interviews with MI6 and the police and MPs. One MP that he spoke to ended up mysteriously dying not long afterwards because he was going to speak out against it. And it can feel, watching people going through the awakening process in the last 5 years has been, I really empathize with them, because it is this horrible, walls are closing in, there's nowhere to go. And at the same time, you're trying to live your life, you're trying to build a career. I ended up getting married, having 5 children, building a business, and that kind of took over. But at the same time, I was reaching for spiritual development, and which ended up with, I think the funniest one was, I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience when you go to like a spiritual retreat or something, and then you feel really out of place, like the first day at school. And I remember going to this peyote ceremony in a wigwam with a Mexican chief on a ley line in Glastonbury, and I pulled up in my Jaguar with my big watch, and I got out of the car, and I got there, and everybody's wearing feathers and stuff, and I was like, oh, I really don't fit in here. And it was like I experienced spiritual snobbery for the first time ever. It was like I wasn't dressed properly. So I did. And then when I had the peyote, I just sort of collapsed like this instead of sitting. But it was interesting, and then that led to ayahuasca and magic mushrooms and plant medicine and all of that, which is kind of like a cliched journey, but they were very handy for me. They were really tools that solidified my increasing notion that there was far more to this than, get a mortgage, do a job, and then die tending your garden or whatever. I mean, it was just not a life really that we should be living, and I've always known that. It's not the life that we should be living. And then through that, I became pretty good at business, and I was teaching internet marketing, and that led me. That's what I used to do before COVID. It's called the Technophobe's Guide to Internet Marketing Success. So I was teaching that because I actually created the world's first online skip hire business. And if you're American, that's like a dumpster hire. And it was massive. It was a huge success until the crash in 2009, 10. And I learned so much there because I experienced the true nature of the financial system. And I'd studied economics as well, and if you haven't read G. Edward Griffin's book about the Federal Reserve, I highly recommend it. I try to start people there actually, because understanding the 3D financial system and everything else is a stepping stone towards people becoming more spiritually aware of themselves and realizing who they are and what power they have. So that was an interesting process, but that led me to teaching. I was teaching at an event about blogging, and one of the people there didn't want to learn how to blog for business. They wanted to learn how to do it because they were a frustrated writer. Cut a long story short, that blog then became at the center of a $200 million lawsuit against the Catholic Church for pedophilia. And I was right in the middle of it. And I met and spent time with the lawyers that were running this case. And I watched them, and I knew that they weren't good, but I couldn't put my finger on it exactly because they're extremely good. These is very high-powered, high-level people within the system. They're extremely good at hiding who they really are. And I saw them do a controlled demolition. This is where I learned about limited hangouts and controlled demolition, because especially in the last 5 years, with a lot of disinformation that's been put out there in all sorts of avenues, with truthers, with different organizations set with different healing modalities, all sorts of stuff like that. And I've got such a acute radar to that stuff because of all my experiences. And I saw them. I sat and listened to 30 men give their testimonies over 3 days. They'd been flown in from all over the world. And I listened to what actually happened to them as children. And it nearly broke me. It was horrific. And then I watched these lawyers destroy that case very slowly. And then it's attrition. It's a war of attrition. They wait for them to die, basically, and they take the hope away from them. It's exactly the same kind of modus operandi that the governments have been doing with all the stuff in the last 5 years. Well, our entire lives, actually. We just didn't realize it until COVID, because then it became really obvious. So this led to me ended up moving to Ireland, because I'd kind of semi-retired, and I'd moved to Marrakesh, and I was bringing up, I had 5 young children, and I'd set up homeschooling. I already knew the education system was no good. I'd had an argument with the head teachers about the organic eggs that my children were eating, and they thought they were no good. And I was like, we have to get out of here. And this is in 2014. I was like, the UK is a prison. There's just cameras everywhere. There's rules everywhere. It's ridiculous. I've got to get out of here. So I had a fantastic 3 or 4 years in Morocco, and then I ended up here. And what I was telling you about the schooling, I set up 2 schools in Morocco, one still going, with about 200 students in it now. So I was successful with that. And I had a very interesting time there, because one of the things I learned, I wanted my children to understand, is that Muslims are no worse than Christians or no worse than anybody else. It's not, we shouldn't label the way that terrorists get labeled. Well, it was a Muslim terrorist, or it was a Catholic terrorist. You don't hear Catholic terrorist anymore, but it's always this labeling. And I really thought it was important that my kids didn't have that fear of people, because actually people are the same all the world over. They're all beautiful. It's just that demons inhabit a lot of people, and then they use that against us as part of the divide and conquer strategy. So we did have they had a very free and beautiful upbringing in Morocco, but then I ended up here. And it was about 2017, 2018. And I didn't realize then, but I was under such huge spiritual attack. It was horrific. And I was drinking heavily, and I was not in a good state. And in fact, I was suicidal. And then my marriage broke up, and I ended up in a cottage in the middle of nowhere, looking out at this rain, going, what am I doing here? But when COVID hit, I understood it. I understood exactly what was going on and what this was about. And it is that hand over the bridge. And what I wanted to, I know I've been talking for a little bit. I hope we're all right for about 5 minutes, because what I wanted to talk about was this idea that when you get called, or when you know that there's something you should be doing, just do it. And don't wait. Don't procrastinate. A few of the things that have frustrated me over the last 5 years have been things that have kind of been dangled like carrots. And I've got nothing against any. I've known about the RV for 30 years, right? But I've heard it so many times, I got fed up of hearing people saying, yeah, I'm going to do this because we're getting billions next week. And I'm like, well, that's next week. It's not what's happening today is what's important. And right now, a friend of mine from this town, he dropped dead at the age of 39 because he'd had 4 vaccines. And I told him that unless you do something about this, you're going to drop. And he did. He dropped dead, 39 years old. And I looked at him in the coffin, because in Ireland you get buried very quickly. It was like the next day he's there and next day he's in the ground. And I was on the bridge in this town, and I said, I got this message: open a healing center. And I was like, what do I know about healing centers? I know nothing about healing centers, but I had interviewed a lot of people over the last 4 or 5 years that know a lot more than me about simple things. I didn't know what living structured water was until a few years ago. I didn't know that you should drink that with salt in it. And if you drink it without salt, you're actually dehydrating yourself. I didn't even know that the word dehydration meant you were lacking in hydrogen, not water. So these things have become opened up. So I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open a healing center right now. And the funny thing about it was, I had a guy had moved in 2 doors down from me in 2017, and he'd randomly picked this town. Me and him had got to know each other a bit, and he's awake and he's spiritual, and and he was into crypto and stuff. So we had a lot to talk about. And then when COVID happened, we were talking about healing centers as a dream in the distance. And then I went round to his house this day in 2023, I think it was, and I knocked on his door and I said, right, we're going to open a healing center. Do you want to do it now? Let's do it now. And he went, all right, let's do it. So we did. And that healing center is called live5dhealth.com. You can go and look at it now. It's the only place in the world with everything that we've got under one roof, but certainly it's the best healing center in Ireland. And we're getting people from all over the world coming here. We've stopped hundreds of people going to hospital. We've reversed all sorts of things, especially the ones that took the jabs and all of that. But the funny thing about this story is with the healing center is that, and we've had 840 franchise inquiries, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I don't want to run a business again. But there is a vision behind this, which I'll share with you briefly. But the funny part of this story is that once I've been talking about being a bridge for the last 5 years because of Dolores Cannon's work, who said that there were these waves of souls coming in for this time. And once I became aware of that, I was like, hang on, I'm a bloke in his 50s now. And she said, you're a bridge between a warrior and a healer. Now, I've always identified with being a warrior because I'm a little bit roughly tufty and, I don't put up with any nonsense. But and I'll stand up whenever there's injustice, like a little Rottweiler. That's my character, the way I see it. And I'm an Aries, so I'm doubly annoying. But healer, I was like, And then suddenly I'm opening a healing center. And then somebody who watches my podcast came in one day and said, you realize you're on Bridge Street and there's a bridge out the window? And I hadn't even noticed. And I thought that was so hilarious, right? Because it was all divinely guided. And we set it up as a private members association so that it's in the system but out the system. And it's it can't be taxed and it can't be regulated because it's not registered with anything, right? And it also means that although we have a price list for treatments, it's donation based. So if my point was to Gary, my partner, I said, look, if a single mum on benefits comes in with an autistic kid and we can help them, they've got to have it for free, but we'll have to charge the people who can afford it so that they can and it's been a beautiful kind of exploration of how to set up I call it a 5D business model, because we've not set it up to make money. But I realized very early on that you have to have, while we're still in the system with the financial system, you have to set something up that enables people to work there and for the bills to be paid and to pay back the money that you've invested to set the place up in the first place. And if you don't do that, you're not going to last very long. So there was a very interesting, I don't know if you guys have heard of the People's Health Alliance in the UK. That was set up by a friend of mine called Catherine McBean, I think in 2021. And it was a beautiful idea. It was like, well, we're going to set up an alternative to the NHS, and we're going to have these nodes everywhere, and people are going to answer the phone, and we're going to give advice on holistic healing and stuff like that. And I thought it was a great idea. And Catherine's a lovely soul and a great warrior. But I said to her 3 years ago, I said, the problem with this, because of my business background, I knew that there was a problem with this. And the problem is that you get donation fatigue sets in. When I started my podcast, I said it'll be over by Christmas. Obviously, because I'm an optimist. I'm an apocalyptimist, actually. Apocalypse, great, revealing, optimist about the outcome. That's who I am. And I said, you're going to get donation fatigue, not just from external donations coming in, which will drop as time goes by, because you can't possibly keep that interest up, but also the people who are volunteering to help with it, they're going to fatigue with it as well. You have to run it as a business. So we set it up as a private members association, and then I got this vision on the way to Cork one day. Again, I get a lot of visions either on the toilet or in the car. That's where they tend to come, when you're actually got space to think. And I pulled the car over, and it was like, well, if we do need to build an alternative health system, we have to start now, because Buckminster Fuller said, and I think this quote is beautiful, in the 50s, he said, you cannot beat the system because you can't, but you can build the one that you want to see. So that's what we've tried to do with Live 5D Health, and we've been successful so far, and it's been an amazing journey to do that. And have all these other people that are interested in doing it. But what I'm trying to do is to create a network of physical locations which are financially funded and independent, and forming it again, just copying that kind of grid idea. Because what I didn't realize that was so important, and it still is now, 2.5 years later, is the amount of people that come there just so that they can speak freely, trade in the private, and we're doing it all outside of the system, despite being attacked. I mean, Ireland's biggest shill lives in the next town and calls me a fascist and white supremacist and every time I do anything. And she's got our accounts closed down at Facebook and Google, and cost us 50,000 euros minimum, right? But we just ignore her and carry on and carry on and carry on. And that's really what I was, and also in the middle of all of this, I set up a publishing company. I've reinvented the publishing industry because I wanted to publish this book with Abby Wynn, who's my co-author. And I said to her, well, if we go on Amazon, the big problem with Amazon is that they are controlling the output. So if you are thinking of writing a book, you've got the average Amazon author earns $500 a year. If you're writing about anything that's off their cabal's message, they will censor it, even though it looks like they've published it. For example, there was a book I bought yesterday called Vandalizing Ireland, which is a really good book I've just got today. But I couldn't find it on Amazon, because it's going against the narrative. So you type it in the title, it's not there. So Amazon are censoring things, even though it looks like, it's been published, so it's okay, but it won't get into the shops. And the publishing industry is part of the mind control system as much as the TV and everything else, because they will edit it and cut it down. Plus, you don't get paid. So I reinvented the whole thing, and then we ended up setting up a publishing company, and we've got 5 books on the go now. One's called Death of the Doctor, where we've got people like David Cartland and Christiane Northrup and people like that contributing to talk about, well, you're a doctor, where do we go next? Because they know, obviously, there's big problems of everything. And we're trying to, and I've got a book here about satanic ritual abuse in Ireland, which is going to blow this country up when I publish that next year. And we're publishing things that are based on truth and growth, because, it's a multifaceted war. A podcast is one thing. Doing a live event is another thing. Books are another thing. Movies are another thing. Poems are another thing. Songs are another thing. So I think my message to everybody watching this is really, whatever you've got in you, don't procrastinate. Just do it, because God's got your back. And and all of this has really taught me that God really has got my back, and there's nothing to fear. And we have won this war in the other dimensions, but here it is difficult watching it play out, but we can do it. And I strongly believe that a massive part of it is the physical aspect. If you can take care of yourself physically, because actually the conclusion that I've come to is that the parasitic entities that attach to us and talk to us and try to trap us into guilt and shame through drinking and drug addiction and all the stupid things that people get addicted to, it's all them, because they're just trying to keep us in the loosh farm. And therefore, if we can clean ourselves, get ourselves talking to each other, nourish ourselves, we are taking, I think that's a kind of technology, the parasites, and that's what they latch onto. If we can get rid of those and strengthen ourselves and support everybody else and look after each other, we're unstoppable. I think that's probably long enough, isn't it?
That was fantastic, Mark. Thank you so much. We do have some questions.
Okay.
Do you have time for questions?
Yeah, I'm all yours.
Becky, do you want to start?
Okay, well, yeah, Mark, there was just so much in all of that, and there was a lot that I could identify with, and I'm a very similar age to you, just 1 year younger. And I recently went to America to meet CC members in different events and venues, and I really felt the very strong hand of God, Source, the Creator, through the whole process, because it was all just so beautiful and so wonderful and so magical, the whole trip. And even being at the airport, the hotel I was in before I had to get the plane, because I had to get up early, was my hotel room was 1111, and then the hotel room that I was put into when I arrived in America was 111, and it just made me laugh because there was just so many signs. That's just two of them, many that showed me that I was doing what I should be doing. I was exactly on the right path, exactly where doing what should be doing, where I should be doing it at that moment. And I felt a very strong sense of the synchronicity, which is a really beautiful feeling, because one doesn't always feel that throughout one's life, as you know. So I just want to commend you, really, and I know everybody will feel this, for you've done some things really the hard way, and you've learned lessons the hard way. And I think many of us who, there's all different ways to wake up to the truth that's going on, and to wake up to who and what we are. And we all have our own way, and I know that everyone here has their own story. But I just really resonated with yours, and I just thought, you've stood in your truth pretty much the whole way through. And I should imagine, I don't know, but you would probably think to yourself, well, perhaps when I was struggling with some addictions, then I wasn't standing in my truth. Maybe then I was going against what I wanted to do, or maybe then I was feeling a sense of stagnation, or not being on the path I wanted to be on, because people often hit the biggest challenges when they feel they're not doing what they want to be doing. But out of that's come some phenomenal work, and especially with the healing centre as well, because not many people have set up a healing centre already, with the resources already. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you to that. Okay, looking at questions. Do you see, this is from Bobby, do you see a moment similar to the Dolores Cannon theory of the splitting earth at the peak of the awakening? And if so, can you please elaborate on how you see that moment manifesting on Earth? What do you see as the tipping point heading into that moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I start by answering it by saying I don't actually know. Right, I'm not one of those people who goes around saying I know exactly what's going to happen and it's going to be on this date at this time. I don't do that, because that's you're asking for trouble. I've always had the strong feeling that humanity would have to be taken to its knees and be calling out for God. That's the feeling that I've always had. And I'm not afraid. I'm looking forward to that day, but I'm enjoying the present moment. And I think the key to all of this is to be looking at what you're doing today rather than looking into the future, because, as I've said to my kids for 20 years, the future doesn't exist yet. There's no point worrying about it, and the past is gone. So just make your peace with that and enjoy this moment, because that's all you've ever had anyway. So, I can speculate about that. I saw a question there about, do you still have ET contact? Yes, I do. And I haven't talked about that today. And I'm claircognizant. So I get a lot of information that I don't put it out like I don't believe in gurus. I kind of try to relate to people and try to make it as much fun as possible, and be positive about it, because all these small things that we do on a daily basis, just like all those micro decisions, are the choice between the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, which manifests on a macro level. That what are we doing as a species, right or wrong, on a because everything's a manifestation of what we are creating, even though that creation process has been hijacked by symbols and by frequencies and stuff like that. The thing is, I think most of the people on this call, and definitely a lot of the people that I hang out with, are part of a mission to just get to that point where we are as well prepared as we can be. And I think the Bible says it's in a flash. It'd be an instantaneous thing. I don't know about. I've been pondering this question for over 20 years about, is it literally a new planet, a new Earth? Are they just going to disappear, these NPCs? I don't actually know, is the short answer. But I do trust the process, and I do trust that it's going to come out really good for us as a species. And I do think that we are. One thing I've definitely noticed is that for myself, my own psychic abilities have definitely enhanced. My visions have enhanced. I have been visited by incredible ships, and I've been able to. There was a party at Michael and Julie's a few years back when I called in the ships over the west of Ireland, and they didn't come for a bit, and I thought, I'm looking a bit rubbish here, and then suddenly they came out, and it was amazing. We had an incredible light show. So I have, and just literally out of my back window here, I saw a dragon fly over my head with my neighbour made of light. So, there's nothing to be worried about, So I'm kind of like enjoying the journey. And in a way, I think it's a bit like Christmas presents. I used to go and look in my parents' wardrobes to see what I was getting for Christmas. And then I'd be really disappointed on Christmas Day because I knew what I was getting. So I kind of have that approach. I'm like, I know it's going to be okay. I know I'm an eternal spirit. So death isn't real. So what am I? I'm not afraid of anything. So what am I doing today that's positive? What am I doing am I taking care of my loved ones? Am I taking care of myself? Am I helping other people? Well, if the answer is yes, it's a good day, and I'll look forward to the next one. So I don't actually know, is the short answer.
Mark, I love your answer, and I would again wholeheartedly agree. I think just the same way. And I just wanted to say, I don't know if you know that we do monthly spiritual topics. Really, they're discussion points, and so the one that we're going to be doing next month is attention, intention, and inspiration. So it is all about focusing on things, and what you put your energy into, you can create. So that's sort of in line with that. And also we've done a spiritual topic on dragons, which was extremely popular. A lot of people are very much into dragons and connect with them and see them. So, and I was just wondering, so what ET races are you in connection with?
Well, it's not like that. There's a lot of I've interviewed a lot of people like Alex Collier and what's her name? It's not
Eleanor.
Oh no, I've never spoken to Eleanor. No, I got cut off from the whole Eleanor crew. It was quite funny because when Ishmael Perez turned up, and he called her an android or something, and then I got tarred with the brush, and I never said a word. But I got Danny Henderson rang me up and said, "No, you can't be in the club anymore because you said something about it." And I said, "No, I didn't." So one of the things I realised about the whole ET community or the disclosure community is that the one word I kept getting was factions. So I thought I'll stand back from this, and you can watch them self-imploding. It's quite amusing because there are factions involved in all of this, and I think I'm directly connected to the head honcho, so I'm not too worried about it all. But I don't. It's interesting because I did do. I've done a number of past life regressions, and one of those did have me as a very tall blue alien Arcturian, basically. So I've definitely connected there. I'm also definitely connected to Venus and Valiant Thor. There's a really strong connection there. But my ET experiences are more to do with the ships that I've seen. I'll just explain. Sometimes I don't tell this because I think I've told it too many times. So if you've heard this before, I apologize. It's quite an interesting story because this is how it works. It's all about paying attention. So, when I started the podcast in 2020, 21, it was insane. It was like 10,000 emails a week. I couldn't keep up. I was burnt out. I was staying up until 5 a.m. watching all the press conferences in Washington, drinking 2 bottles of wine and getting up and doing it all again. And it just never stopped until it did, thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here anymore. But I got an email one day, and I always would skip through the emails going, okay, because some people just write nonsense to you. And this one really stood out. And it said, the opening line was, "They know that you look up every night." And it hit me like a hammer because I've looked up every single night my whole life, since the moment I remember, being aware of myself. And I think this is why I became a pilot, because I think I've got very strong memories of flying all over the universe. And I read this email and it said, they know that you look up every night. And she said, I don't watch your podcast. And I was like, oh, why are you writing to me then? And then she said, they want you to look up, and they want you to, and all of you, if you've never heard this, you can all do this, right? She said, next time you go outside, look up at the stars and then wait until you connect with one of them. And you'll know when you connect with one, and then you'll feel it. So I'm stood out the back door smoking a cigarette, thinking, I hope nobody's watching me. And I'm trying to connect with this star. And I felt it, and it went up and down me like this. And I was like, oh. And then she said, when you get that connection, ask it to move left and right and then up and down just to confirm. So I did this telepathically, and it did. And I was like, wow. And then as I was looking at it, there was a flash over in the sky over here, and I quickly looked over, and it had gone. And then I looked back at the star, and then what I heard was, did you see that? And I said, yes, I did. And then there was another flash, and I looked over again, and it had gone, and I went back to the star, and it said, did you see that? And I said, yes, I did. And then it said, are you afraid? And I said, no. And as soon as I said no, this amazing light just popped up over the rooftops over there. Huge white light. It's a beautiful kind of white that I can't, when I've explained it, it's kind of like animated. If any of you ever want to go and look, if you go onto Rumble and type in Mark Attwood 5D sun, there's a little film I made there about a stone circle in Derbyshire 2 or 3 years ago. And a very similar thing happened there when the sun came out. It was, I won't explain the whole video, but if you want to go and watch it, it's well worth watching. And this light just moved along, and I was just stood there watching it. And then the whole sky, as it got here, the sky lit up, and it was a triangle, but it wasn't a TR3B. It was a triangle like this with rounded corners, but it was a kind of burnt orange color, and it had black hieroglyphics all over it. And then it just went like the Enterprise in Star Trek. And I was like, whoa. And then I tried to wake my son up, and I was banging on his window and go, Joe, wake up. He said, what is it? It's a UFO. And he went, not another one, go away. Because he'd seen so many with me over the years. I mean, I've seen them everywhere. But this ship, ever since I saw that ship, I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm completely good. And I interviewed Alex Collier 2 weeks later. I told him the story, and he said that was your future self. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I'm not sure if that's true. But I do enjoy not knowing. This is why my show is called Adventures in a Cosmic Suit, because I'm an idiot who's just had experiences and isn't afraid to talk about them, and hopefully that gives other people courage to speak up and be themselves and not be afraid of being judged or anything, because we're all amazing. And there is definitely, nobody could ever tell me that there's not something there. Are they Arcturians? Are they Venusians? Are they Draco? I don't exactly. Well, I think they're good. It's like the 3-Eye Atlas thing. That is really quite kind of exciting. But if you ask me, what is it? Well, I've connected with it. I've had visions, but I don't always speak about them, because I don't always think it's a good idea to do that, because everybody's got it. I'm more about encouraging you to go and find out yourself. I don't know if that's answered the question. I don't remember what the question was.
Yes, it did. That's fine. Thank you. Yeah. Angela, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
So, Mark, one of our attendees writes, I love that you turn creative under adversity. What do you think it is that sparks creativity, and how can we harness the power of creation to navigate adversity?
Well, I think we're all creators, and we're all incredibly creative. And I think the only thing that stops anybody doing it is that voice that's been programmed into you to tell you not to do it, and that you're not good enough. And I think you just got to get over it. I mean, there's a sketch. I actually quote this sketch a lot. Do you remember Bob Newhart in the 70s? If you go to YouTube and type in Bob Newhart, stop it. Go and watch that sketch, because that's what I quote to everybody all the time. Well, I can't do this. Stop it! Well, no, I'm not. Stop it! It's like, just that's me. It's just the way I am. And I know some people want their hand holding and stuff like that, and I do teach people as much as I can, but I'm a bit annoying as a teacher because I'm just like, just get on with it, because we've all got these abilities, all of us. There's nobody above or below anybody else. It's all within us. It's innate. Just go with the thing that makes you happy, because opening a door for somebody or picking up a piece of litter is just as important as creating peace in the Middle East. It's incredibly powerful because it affects everybody. And when you are expressing yourself with truth, even if it's your truth, it doesn't matter if it's not 100% true. I mean, who is 100% true or right about everything? Nobody. So just be yourself. In fact, I did get nagged again in 21. I was being nagged from June until about September. Make a course about internet marketing for your audience. And I was like, why would anybody in the middle of a pandemic want to know about internet marketing? And so I eventually gave in, did it, created a course. I recorded it over 6 weeks. And it was only in the second week of doing it that I realized the reason I was being asked to make that course was to give people some tools and encouragement to speak up and follow their passion. It wasn't about making money. It was about not being afraid to speak up, not being afraid to put your face. Being online is a very strange thing. But I don't know. It's some people, it's like you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it, but you don't have to, but you can speak up in front of the teachers when they're trying to force sexualized education onto your children or make them wear masks. Right, you can stand up in the local council and say, well, actually, that smart city is not a good idea. It's not just about being public. It's just about being in total integrity with your soul and forgetting about the fact, not forgetting, but forgiving yourself for the fact that you've been under demonic attack your entire life, and you might have done and said a few stupid things. So what? We all have. You just get over it and think about, what are we doing now and in the future, going forward. I think I've made that point.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, simple is the best answer. I mean, that's just a beautiful way to express it. Becky, you want to ask the last question?
Okay, yeah. I was just saying, so you're saying it's basically time for right action, which is just doing what it is that you're here to do, and it's time for everyone to start doing that. And again, that's very much in line with what we talk about in our organization. So thank you. I'm just scanning through here.
Well, I was going to mention.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh,
go
well,
on.
that's lovely. No, I was just going to mention another thing that crossed my mind. It's like med beds, for example. I am 100% convinced med beds exist, but they're not here now. Mm-hmm. So I got frustrated. People would say, well, I'm waiting for the med beds. Well, you could be dead by the time that comes out. Do something today. And it can be as simple as structured living water that's been cleaned. We have the best water in the whole country in our centre. We've invested a lot into cleaning it, structuring it, magnetizing it. And we give that water to people and they can't believe how good it tastes. And then we're saying, we'll go. And then they're like, well, I can't afford to do it. You can. You get a jug with a spoon and you stir the water for 10 minutes. You've got structured water. Take your shoes off, stand on the grass. It's, somebody asked me this on Facebook in 2019 or 2020. Well, what are we supposed to do? And it was the same answer. Well, connect with nature, ground yourself, fill yourself full of negative ions, make sure your water's clean. I didn't know about the salt then, but add salt is the other thing. And get the best food you can possibly eat. And, that's it.
Absolutely. It's about looking after yourself. It's about taking responsibility. It's about sovereignty and recognizing that your health is your responsibility, and to stop waiting for someone else to save. I mean, I know that's easier said than done, and that's quite challenging, but it is the little steps, isn't it? It's do something new today that will help your health, and then tomorrow do something else as well, and build it up. So, yeah.
And it can all be done. I mean, if you told me that I wouldn't be drinking alcohol anymore, even 2 years ago, I'd have laughed at you. I was like, I love drinking. I don't drink now. It's just, I haven't stopped the cigarettes yet, but I'm not perfect, but I'm getting there. But the food's good. everything else is good. The sleep's good. It's like none of us are perfect. Don't beat yourself up is the other thing. Everybody suffers from this. I'm not good because usually their mother saying you're not good enough when you're very young. These messages go in, and then it's the school system, and then it's the church, and then it's this, and then it's that. Just connect. Just get your own connection and follow your heart and bugger the consequences is what I say.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think that's wonderful. I think that's a good place to.
Oh, we're not going to talk about birth.
Oh, well, I was wondering how it fits in now with all of this.
Well, it kind of does because, birth is the biggest thing that they've completely hijacked because of this agenda to have weakened, automatons to take the loosh from. But so, yeah, I think birth is fundamental and, yeah. But I only brought it up because you said you wanted to talk about it.
I know, I do. I really do. But I'm wondering whether we can do this another time if you're happy to come back because
it is a big subject.
It's a massive subject. Yeah. And I would, it feels like today's talk has sort of, come to a natural conclusion. Yeah. But I would absolutely love it, Mark, if you would come back and maybe join Chris and me with a Sacred Wisdom podcast because your ethos, your philosophy is very, very much in alignment with ours and with CC's. And I know that people would love to hear more from you if you're okay to do this.
Well, that's why I wanted to do this because when CC 5 years ago to me would have been like, I'd have been like, oh, not sure about that. And then I met all the people and I was like, wow, they're all amazing. So that's, I think I've softened in a lot of my attitudes because I think what you've done with CC is amazing to bring people together like this all over the world. I mean, when I went to Nashville, I couldn't believe that was a CC meeting, and it was like it was amazing, And,
well, I've just been to Tennessee. I mean, I've just been to Knoxville, and then in North Carolina, Charlotte in North Carolina, and then in Florida. So, and I'm definitely going back again and want to go all around the world because CC is worldwide. We've got 120,000 members, 75,000 of them are in the USA, and we've got coordinators and volunteers worldwide, and everyone's on the same page, and it's all about empowering people, connecting them, empowering them, bringing in people like you who have a very similar ethos and great knowledge and understanding, and just it's all about sharing and being able to integrate other people's knowledge, keeping your minds open, and just deciding how that'll impact you moving forwards. So,
100%.
Well, this has been a great discussion, Mark, and it sounds like you have an open invitation to come back and talk to us. So I really want to thank you for all your time. Thank you, Becky, for your input, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. And this has just been a marvelous, marvelous session. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, thank everyone for coming, and hope you'll join us on the next Worldwide Voices.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely evening or day, whatever you're doing, and God bless you all.